Steve, 25 years old, single, worked as an ordinary worker in a huge construction company. He was a strong, muscular guy for his age, as he lifted heavy weights every day and went to work out at the local gym a couple of days a week. His best friend, Mike, was an auto mechanic and worked in his father's shop. He does his job very well. Mike was invited to a Canada Day party on July 1st. Since he didn't want to take his girlfriend with him and didn't want to go alone, he convinced Steve to accompany him. Steve agreed since he had nothing to do that evening. It was an ordinary party held in the backyard. The patio was turned into a dance floor. The music was loud, and there was a lot of drinking. Steve sat quietly in the corner, sipping his beer, while Mike walked around, chatting. A young girl with a bottle of beer in her hands staggered up to Steve and collapsed on the chair next to him. She downed the entire bottle in one gulp and burped. "Sorry," she said to Steve. "Slow down, young lady. You have the whole evening ahead of you," Steve replied. "I celebrate. We are all celebrating." "No, I'm celebrating," she emphasized. "Okay, you're celebrating." Steve smiled. "She'll start having hiccups soon," he thought. "Yes, I'm celebrating my breakup with my ex-boyfriend. He cheated on me." She stood up and, with some difficulty, walked onto the dance floor and began moving her body to the beat of the music. Steve continued to sip his beer and noticed two guys standing near the patio joined the girl and danced next to her. 10 minutes later, she left the dance floor and went for a glass of whiskey. She turned to Steve and smiled. She raised her glass towards him and swallowed it all. He shook his head. "Hey, man, why are you just sitting here?" Mike asked. "Go and talk to people." Steve turned towards the dance floor, but could not see either the girl or the two guys. He jumped up from his chair. "What's happening?" Mike asked in surprise. "I'll go find some more beer," Steve answered. Steve looked around but couldn't find her. He then walked towards the front of the house. There were cars parked in the driveway and also on the street. 100 meters away, in a dark spot, he could see someone standing. He quietly approached, and what he saw made him furious. She tried to resist the two guys but was too drunk. Steve didn't hesitate. There was a fight between them. She seemed a little lost and sleepy. He picked her up and led her to his car. He placed her in the passenger seat and, after searching her pockets, found a house key with Eglinton Heights written on the holder. Steve knew every corner of the city, having worked on all the major construction sites. He stepped on the gas and drove to this address. He parked in the visitor's parking lot. "What is your apartment number?" Steve asked, waking her up. Your apartment number?" Steve yelled. 4 and 12, she muttered. Steve put her hand on his shoulder and led her to the 4th floor, holding her in his arms. Once in her room, Steve laid her on the bed and went to the bathroom. He found what he was looking for, a bucket. Then he went to the kitchen and dissolved a mixture of salt and sugar in a glass of water. He made her drink some of the mixture, keeping the bucket nearby. Suddenly she began to shake and vomited into a bucket. Steve then wiped her mouth and let her lie down. 15 minutes later, Steve repeated with the drink, and she vomited again. After a couple of bouts of vomiting, Steve carried her into the bathroom and let the cold water wash over her. She was too weak to fight. Steve then put her to bed and covered her with a blanket. Steve sat on a chair next to the bed and watched her sleep. It was early morning when she woke up a little anxious, looking at the ceiling as if trying to figure out what happened the night before. She was startled when she found Steve sitting across from her. She lifted the blanket and found that she was naked. "What did you do?" she screamed. "Easy, girl." Steve stood up. "I actually stopped 2 guys from doing this to you." "Who? 2 guys? Why am I naked?" She then noticed the bruises on Steve's knuckles and the redness on his face. "It's time for me to leave. I advise you to have a good rest and stay away from alcohol." Steve left the room. Like a drifting fog, she recalled fragments of memories from the previous night. Party. She drank a lot. 2 guys dragged her to the car. There was a fight there. The glass shattered. He saved me. She jumped out of bed, quickly put on jeans and a t-shirt, and ran out of the room. In the corridor, she heard the elevator door close. She ran down the stairs and out of the building, Too late, she only saw the young man drive away in his red Dodge Daytona. The following Saturday night, Steve and Mike were drinking beer at a local pub when Mike's cell phone rang. He listened to the caller and then turned to Steve. "Do you know Trisha?" "No." Steve continued to drink his beer. "On the phone, some girl says that she doesn't know your name, but she knows that you are my best friend. Is she calling to sell something?" "Miss, unfortunately, my friend doesn't know you, and if you're trying to sell something, we're not interested." Mike listened for a minute. "She said she was at a party last week and you took her to her apartment." "Oh, her name is Trisha. I didn't ask." Steve picked up the phone. "Is there something I should know?" Mike smiled. Steve shook his head. "Yes, Trisha. How can I help you this time?" "Hello? First of all, I want to thank you for what you did last time. Without you, I don't know where I would be now and in what condition. I only did what I needed to do to help someone in danger. No, you did something that no one else would have done. You are my savior, my hero. Thank you. And from now on you must behave? Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes, I understand. I've been a good girl since that party and I intend to stay that way." "Cute. By the way, how did you find out Mike's phone number?" "I went to the house where there was a party and asked about you, but no one knew you. I gave you a description and the car you drive, but still, no one had a clue. The party host called me this morning saying you might be Mike's friend, and he gave me his phone number." "Okay, Trisha, it was nice talking to you. I'm actually having a beer with Mike and... Are you free tomorrow for dinner together?" Trisha interrupted him. I just want to say thank you personally," added Trisha. "Certainly. I'll take your number from this phone and call you tomorrow morning. And my name is Steve." They met on Sunday evening and had dinner at a fancy restaurant. They avoided talking about what happened at the party. They talked about themselves and their work. Trisha worked as a data entry clerk for corporate supply chain. After that, they went for a walk, and finally Steve took her to her house. "Thank you very much for this pleasant evening, Steve, my hero." Trisha kissed Steve on the cheek and got out of the car. He watched as she walked to the main entrance of the building and then drove away. 2 weeks later, Steve called Trisha and invited her to a movie. They talked for a few minutes and finally Trisha told him that she had been waiting for his call. "I was waiting for yours too," Steve stammered. After the movie, Steve walked Trisha to her apartment after she invited him for coffee. In the small living room, Steve found a brochure on the table. It was from a tattoo parlor. "I was thinking about getting a tattoo on my lower back," Trisha said, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "You don't need a tattoo," Steve answered. "I thought here..." "I like your body the way it is." Steve cut her off. Steve walked up to her and kissed her. They made love. They dated for several months and decided to get married. They rented a 2-bedroom townhouse and made it their home. They were happy together. A year later, Steve met his high school friend Billy at the mall. Billy interviewed people and handed out his business cards. "Hi, Billy. Long time no see," Steve said. "Hey, Steve. The last time we talked, we were kids," Billy answered. "What are you doing?" Steve asked. "I changed careers. I was fired from my last job." "I'm sorry to hear it. I saw you handing out your business cards to people." "I myself work as an insurance agent." "What? I don't understand." "I don't work for a financial company. I work on a commission basis selling my products, life insurance, and investments." "Oh, I understand. What about you? Married? Children?" Billy asked. "I work in a construction company." "Yes, I'm married. I don't have children. And you?" "Married. Like you and I don't have children," Billy replied. "It was nice talking to you, Billy. I have to go. My wife is waiting for me. By the way, do you have life insurance? Are you protected? Did you think about your wife if something happened to you, or about your children when you have them?" "That idea never occurred to me," Steve replied. "This is the biggest mistake everyone makes. Here's my business card. Talk to your wife and call me. It will be my pleasure to come to your home when you are both present. That's what we usually do. It's called the kitchen table. I meet with both spouses at their residence, explain everything about the defense and future goals, and answer any questions that arise. Okay, I'll call you soon. Steve put the card in his pocket. That night after dinner, Steve told Trisha about Billy and how it would be nice if they both listened to him about life insurance and protection. Trisha wasn't thrilled as it would be an additional monthly expense. "Let's listen to what he has to offer, and then we'll decide," Steve said to his wife. "We can meet him here next week." The next week, Billy visited Steve and Trisha and explained the difference between term and whole life insurance. He also advised them to start investing money for their retirement. In the end, Billy came with a package for joint term life insurance to suit their protection needs. The monthly premium will be low since they are still very young. A couple of days later, Billy returned with the policies to close the deal. Before leaving, he asked them for some recommendations and gave Trisha his business card. 3 months later, Trisha called Steve at work. "Hey, honey, I'm going to have to work overtime this week and I'll be done around 8 today." "Okay, no problem. I'll cook dinner and wait for you." "Thank you. You are so sweet." After dinner, Trisha explained that the workload had increased recently, and the company did not want to hire more employees. She worked overtime 3 times that week. 2 weeks later, she had to work overtime again. Steve didn't argue and prepared dinner himself. 6 months later, Steve was sent to a construction site near Trisha's work. Around noon, he decided to go and invite her to lunch. When he got to the office where she worked, he was told that she had just left for lunch. Outside, in the parking lot, he saw her car. She could walk to the nearest restaurant, Steve thought. Then he remembered that when they were dating, he once invited her to lunch, and they went to a small and cozy pizzeria 5 minutes walk from her work. He rushed there. Steve saw her walking towards the pizzeria and tried to call her, but she couldn't hear over the traffic noise. Entering the restaurant, he found Trisha and Billy sitting at a table. "Hi, Steve," Billy greeted, trying to smile. Trisha turned around with a look of shock on her face, but quickly smiled. "I came here for pizza and to see who I met." "Hey, Billy," Steve said, still a little embarrassed. "I'm done, and I need to go. I have a meeting with potential clients in 15 minutes. Billy stood up and shook Steve's hand. "It was good to see you, Trisha." Billy walked up to the counter, and Steve felt that he was a little tense while paying and had a serious conversation with the cashier. Twice the latter raised his head to look at Steve and Trisha. "I work nearby and decided to visit you and invite you to lunch," Steve told Trisha. "You should have called me, and I would have waited for you, dear." Billy walked past their table and raised his hand to say goodbye. Going out into the street, he got into a brand new car. Wow, he's made a lot of progress in his new job. Steve looked at his friend running away. "Let's order, okay?" Trisha was a little nervous. "Is something wrong, Trisha?" "Not at all. I only have 20 minutes left before the end of lunch," she replied. One Monday evening, while Trisha was working overtime, Steve wanted to work on their expenses and see how much money they could save in a month. "It's high time to get your own home," he thought. "They must have a sufficient amount as a down payment." Trisha was the one who kept all the records of everything. She kept everything in the last drawer of her desk. He didn't want to wait for her and decided to get all the past bank statements and start working on them. He wrote down all the expenses, and within an hour, he had an idea of what to cut and what to eliminate. He put all the documents back in the desk drawer and went to drink beer in the kitchen, analyzing the numbers in his head. Suddenly, it dawned on him. He ran to take all the documents from the desk drawer again. He studied the receipts one by one. For more than a year, Trisha's salary has not changed. How about overtime pay? Steve thought about it. Something is wrong somewhere. For the past 6 months, she has been working overtime almost every 2 weeks. Where's the money? Steve put the documents back in the drawer the way he found them. He opened a second can of beer. Either she saves her overtime money elsewhere, or she doesn't work after hours, Steve thought. Steve later heard Trisha's car pull into the driveway. When she entered the house, Steve was sipping another can of beer. "Honey, you look tired," Steve said. "This job will kill me. Why don't you look for someone else who won't kill you?" You know how hard it is to find a good job with good pay these days, she retorted. When is your next overtime? As usual, on Wednesday and Friday. I'll heat up the food. Steve stood up and went to the refrigerator. When they went to bed, Tricia immediately fell into a deep sleep. Steve looked at the ceiling and thought. The only question he asked himself was whether his wife was cheating on him. The next day he called Mike, the only person he could trust. "Hey, Mike, I need to see you this afternoon," he said in a serious voice. Mike knew his friend very well and sensed that something was wrong. "Let's meet at the pub." On Wednesday evening, both friends were sitting in Mike's car across from Tricia's workplace. Her car was parked. They had been waiting for an hour. Finally, the three women, including Tricia, left the building and each headed to their car. "Let's wait and see if any man comes out," asked Steve. They waited 15 minutes and no one came out of the building. Steve sent Tricia a text message. "I went to buy beer." When Steve returned home with a pack of beer, Tricia had already set the table. On Friday night, Mike was the only one spying on Tricia. He was in contact with Steve all the time. As before, she went straight home. That night, while Tricia was sleeping, Steve took her cell phone and went through all the messages and phone calls. On Saturday, the two friends met again to discuss the next step. "I checked her cell phone and didn't find anything suspicious," Steve told Mike. "She's probably deleting everything," Mike suggested. "Your words make sense. You see, Steve, if you really want to know the truth, you will have to spy on her every day and all day. You don't have time for this, and you're not a professional. So what? So you'll have to hire a private detective, and it'll cost you a lot." "What should I do then?" Steve asked. "I have an idea. Come with me." Mike took Steve to an electronics store and recommended that he buy 3 voice-activated voice recorders with long-lasting batteries. That afternoon, Steve discreetly hid one in the kitchen next to the house phone, one in the bedroom, and one in Tricia's car under the passenger seat. Before going to bed, Tricia tried to snuggle up to her husband. "I'm tired." Steve pushed her away. "I had a hard week." Tricia turned on her side and fell asleep. The next morning, like every Sunday, Steve went to the gym. He returned before noon and found a note from Tricia on the kitchen table. "I went shopping." Steve immediately checked the recorder in the kitchen. Apart from some household noise, there was nothing particularly interesting there. With what was in the bedroom, he could listen to Tricia's one-way phone conversation. "Hey, can we talk?" "I miss you too, honey." "Oh, he went to the gym. He'll be back by noon." "Yes, I'm excited for Wednesday." "You're right. That's the benefit of flexible work hours." "Where are you taking me this time?" "You'll confirm it tomorrow, but don't take me to the Motel 6. Like last time, I didn't like it there." "Okay, I need to go. We'll talk to you tomorrow." "Love you." Steve tried to process what he had just heard. He was a cuckold. He didn't know who the guy was, but he knew he was married. The reason why she was not paid for overtime was clear to him. They'll be meeting on Wednesday, and the last time was at Motel 6. "Bitch!" he yelled. He needed to know who this guy was and where they were going before deciding on a plan. He called Mike and told him what he had discovered. That evening, he played the tired husband again. He couldn't sleep. What if this asshole calls her at work, he thought. On Monday morning, while Tricia was in the bathroom, Steve took the recorder from the kitchen and hid it at the bottom of her purse. "I hope this works," he thought. All day, his thoughts were occupied with Tricia and her lover. He made all kinds of plans. Worst-case scenario, he would have to take Mike's car and follow them on Wednesday. At home that afternoon, as soon as Steve saw that Tricia was very busy in the kitchen, he went into the bedroom and took the recorder out of her bag. He then took the car key from her and carefully walked over to retrieve another voice recorder from under the seat. He decided to listen to the one from the car first, since the one in the bag had hours of recording. "I will listen to music from the computer. Let me know as soon as dinner is ready," he told Tricia. He turned on his headphones and could hear the morning commute to her work. For about 30 minutes, he listened to the sound of the engine and the radio. There was a silent pause. He heard the door open and close. Then Tricia's voice was heard. Hello, dear. I'm sorry I couldn't answer your call earlier. My boss was nearby and I had a lot to do. Where? Lake Simcoe? Wow, a lakefront cabin with a private beach. That sounds amazing. It belongs to one of your clients. You're doing a good business, Billy. Steve frowned and continued listening. Maybe one day I will join you and sell insurance. Yes, and investments too. As always, I'll leave my car in the same place and I'll go with you. I need to get back to work. Bye, honey. Now Steve knew who the lover was and where they were going to meet. He called Mike. After dinner, he told Tricia that he was going to meet Mike at the pub for a beer. Don't be late, Tricia told her husband. In fact, both friends met in the parking lot. After Steve told Mike everything, he asked his friend about his plan. I was thinking that both of them would have a surprise on the way back, like 4 flat tires. They should have already planned the time they would leave Lake Simcoe so that Tricia would get home around the same time she usually arrived after work. This would put both of them in a tense position. By the time she gets home, I will no longer be with all my things. I'll send a copy of the tape to Billy's wife and find a lawyer to divorce this bitch. It's a good idea, but someone needs to follow them to know where the car is and damage all the tire valves without being noticed, Mike reminded Steve. It's a complicated plan, I know, but I can't think of anything else. What car does he drive? Mike asked. Steve told him. Oh, this piece of crap? Mike exclaimed. What do you mean? Steve was puzzled. You'll see. I bet this model will be recalled in a couple of months, he said. Why? Asked Steve. There is a problem with the suspension. Several bolts are constantly becoming loose and can cause serious damage to the car. On Tuesday morning, Steve called Billy from work and asked him if he could come home that evening as he had some money to invest and would need his advice. Billy had an appointment with a client at 7 p.m. and didn't want to postpone the meeting, but Steve insisted. Billy then agreed to come at 9 p.m. Steve immediately sent Tricia a text message saying Billy would be coming that evening for investment advice. During lunch, Tricia called him. Steve, we can barely save money every month. What will you invest in? Baby, I wanted to surprise you at home, but since you asked, I'm getting a significant increase on my next paycheck. This is amazing. We need to celebrate, Steve tried to be happy. Yes, of course. We will talk about it. Am I still your hero? Of course it is. Lying bitch, Steve thought as he hung up. That evening, the three of them sat down at the table and Billy began to explain about mutual funds and their benefits. Billy selected several funds and left a couple of brochures. Last time you told me where your wife works, but I forgot. Steve avoided meeting Billy's gaze. Jenny works at RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, downtown. You both make a good couple. If I don't invest with you, I'll have to do it with your wife. All three laughed. After swallowing his beer, Steve told his friend that he would look through the brochures and will think about his advice. He will call him in a few days and confirm everything. After Billy left, Steve opened the bottle of whiskey and filled his glass. Aren't you going to get some wine, dear? Steve asked Tricia. You know that I don't touch alcohol anymore, Tricia almost screamed. I know, I was just asking. And Steve, you know very well that you hate the mixture of beer and whiskey. I'm celebrating, darling. Well, if you get drunk, you'll sleep on the couch tonight. Tricia turned and went upstairs to the bedroom. On Wednesday morning, when Steve walked into the kitchen, Tricia was drinking coffee and getting ready to leave. She took her purse and headed towards the door. Will you be back after work? Asked Steve. Tricia paused for a few seconds and then opened the door. I asked if you would come home after work. It's either yes or no. Tricia turned to him with a tear-stained face. You are my husband. This is our home. Where do you want me to go? I am late. Next time. She left the house. Steve watched her drive away in her car. She would rather go and meet her lover than talk to her husband, he told himself. As soon as Steve arrived at work, Mike called him. Hey, Steve, I followed her like you ordered. She parked her car in a shopping center near her work and waited for the guy. Once he was there, she got into his car, and they drove north. Thank you, Mike. Why are you so quiet? Your thoughts are somewhere far away. Aren't you excited? Billy seemed worried as they drove down the highway. This is Steve. And what happened to him? This morning, when I was leaving, he asked me if I would come home after work. Does he suspect something? Does he know anything? I don't know. We were very careful. Maybe he feels rejected. Maybe subconsciously I didn't give him what he expected from me. Don't blame yourself, Trisha. But he doesn't deserve it. I'm cheating on him with his friend. There's only sex between us. He is the one you love. I know, but he won't understand. Do you want to go back? No, I just want to relax, but nothing more. I hope you understand. No problem. Thank you, Billy. They should be at or near their destination by now. Steve glanced at his watch. From time to time, he glanced at his watch and could not get rid of the thought that Billy was with Trisha. I can't wait until noon, he told himself. Suddenly, a devious smile appeared on his face. He asked his boss for a long coffee break as he had some important personal calls to make. Billy parked in front of the cottage and Trisha immediately got out of the car and walked towards the lake. It's beautiful and calm here. Trisha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I finally see a smile on your face. Billy smiled. Come here and hug me. Billy suggested they take a walk along the beach. As they walked holding hands, Trisha's phone rang. She looked at the incoming phone number and did not answer the call. Steve? Billy asked her. She nodded. Less than a minute later, the phone rang again. And this time, Trisha put the conversation aside and turned off the phone. Bitch! Steve yelled. He was in his car. He dialed another number. Mike, I need one more favor from you, buddy. What if he calls you at work? Billy asked. I didn't think about that. Trisha frowned. I'll tell him I took the day off after what he did to me last night. At the same time, Billy's phone rang. I don't recognize this number, he told Trisha. Don't take him, she advised. It could be someone from the main office looking for me or a potential client. I have to respond. He clicked on the green phone icon. He didn't have time to greet the caller before he heard a man's voice. Asshole, tell Trisha to answer her husband's call. And the guy on the end of the other line hung up. Billy stood as still as a statue, still holding the phone to his ear. What's happened? Who was that? Trisha seemed very worried. It was a man, muttered Billy, whose voice I didn't recognize. What did he say? Trisha took him by the shoulders and shook him. So that I tell you to answer Steve's call. Oh my God, he knows everything. We need to turn on your phone. He hurried back to the car and Trisha followed. She turned on her mobile phone and at the same moment it rang. Is he? Billy asked with a concerned look. Reply. Steve, please. It's not what you think. Let me explain, Trisha cried. There's nothing to explain, bitch. Steve shouted over the phone. Billy could hear him. I've known everything for several weeks now. What do you do in your free time from work? Please, Steve, listen to me. Shut up. Listen to me. I'm throwing all your things out of the house and meeting with a lawyer today with all my evidence. I beg you, Steve, let's meet and talk. What to talk about? Don't you understand? It's all over between us. Trisha started crying. I had a private investigator follow you, Steve lied. Trisha looked at Billy with eyes full of horror. I love you, Steve. Please don't throw me out of your life. It was only sex. Bullshit, Trisha. Is this your definition of love? Sorry, Steve, give me one more chance, please. Forgive? Forgive? I already gave you a chance. I made it clear that there were big problems in our relationship, but you still left to meet your lover. Now tell this asshole that I made some phone calls and know the branch where his wife Jenny works. I'm on my way there right now with a copy of the DVD. He'd better meet me at the bank entrance in 40 minutes. I want him to tell me to my face why I shouldn't give Jenny a copy of the video. In 40 minutes and not a second more. Steve hung up and turned off his cell phone. Billy was completely confused when Trisha told him what Steve was going to do. Get in the car quickly, he shouted to Trisha. Try to contact him and convince him not to date Jenny. He turned off his phone, Trisha sobbed. Try to call that guy. Billy pressed the call back button and gave Trisha his phone. Trisha looked at the phone number. This is Mike, his best friend. But Mike didn't answer the phone. I'll call him from my phone, Trisha suggested. Crap, He also turned off his phone. Billy was driving at a speed of 100 km/h. You won't get there in 40 minutes, Billy. I have to. I don't want him to destroy what I have. Trisha looked at him in shock. Why don't you call Jenny? I can't put her under stress. She is 8 months pregnant. Damn it. You can cheat on her during pregnancy, but you're afraid to call? They got onto the highway, and Billy was now driving at over 150 km/h. Who does he think he is, your weakling husband? Billy grabbed the steering wheel angrily. He's not a weakling, Billy. He's just a piece of shit. It was like a dagger striking her flesh. He's the best man I've ever known. Really? That's why you slept with me? Billy, shut up. Trisha was annoyed. Trisha shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Billy was driving at almost 200 km/h, changing lanes from time to time to avoid oncoming and passing cars. They were arguing. At the same time, a vibration suddenly ran through the entire car. Trisha and Billy looked at each other in horror. He slammed on the brake and tried to pull the car to the side of the road, but the car did not comply. In the afternoon, Steve received a call from the police. He was told his wife had been injured in a car accident and was being treated at South Lake Hospital in Newmarket, a city north of Toronto. He acted like a shocked husband. He asked several questions, but was told that police were still working on the cause of the accident and that he should come to the hospital. He immediately went to Mike and explained what had happened. You will take me to Newmarket. I don't want the police to catch my husband driving alone under stress. An hour later, a nurse ushered Steve into the waiting room. After a couple of minutes, 2 policemen came and sat next to him. She was with Billy Wilson when his car crashed on the highway. According to an eyewitness, he was driving at extremely high speeds towards Toronto. He died on the spot, and your wife was seriously injured. When firefighters pulled her from the wreckage, she said only these few words before falling unconscious. Tell Steve I'm sorry. Let him forgive me. The doctor would like to meet with you. The nurse showed Steve the corridor. The 3rd door on your right. Steve headed in the indicated direction. I'm Dr. Martino. I'm sorry about the accident with your wife. Please have a seat. She is given a strong sedative to reduce the pain, the doctor continued. What I'm about to say is not good at all. You will have to be strong. Steve looked the doctor in the eye, waiting for him to continue. She's on life support. You will have to make a decision, only for you, the doctor added. When can I talk to her? Steve asked in a broken voice. She can't see and she can't talk, but she can hear. At the same time, a nurse entered the office and handed the doctor some documents. He looked through it and signed various pages. He then gave it to Steve. Please review it and see if all the information is correct, and when you decide, you will write your name and sign the pages above, the dotted line next to my signature. Here's a pen for you. He gave Stevie a pen. Stevie entered the room and found Tricia lying in bed broken. She was connected by wires to various machines and monitors. He sat down next to her. It's me, Steve. Tears streamed down her face. Bill died as a result of your accident. A jagged figure suddenly appeared on the monitor. I fought for you, Tricia. I took hits to protect you. I put my life in danger for you. You considered me your hero. And this is my reward, betrayal with another behind my back. Tricia tried to open her mouth to speak, but couldn't. If you didn't love me anymore, you should have told me. I would let you go, but you chose to lie to me, play with my feelings, give me a few careless seconds. Thank God we don't have children. And you want me to forgive you? How can I? Steve, furious, took the document and signed where necessary. I will never forgive you. The monitors went crazy, and an alarm sounded. Dr. Martino and 2 nurses rushed into the room. Steve handed the doctor the documents and nodded to him. He left the room. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.